Well, it's a little difficult to believe, and it seems to be the latest story, blaming the moderators, blaming the staff, blaming the cold. I don't know. What I do know is that we're at serious risk of our government being taken over by a criminal and his gang. The democracy values that we cherish so much being lost to an authoritarian strongman. And this week, we know the Supreme Court basically said Trump can do what he wants to. We know how compliant a Republican Congress would be. I just felt it was important to speak out in the most respectful way possible and say this is not about one night. This has been a problem for a year that our nominee has been lagging behind our strong Senate candidates in half a dozen key states, no sign of significant improvement, and now we have the great disappointment of this debate where the president did not look good, did not refute the many lies of President Trump, and did not really do a good job of promoting the many accomplishments. So I salute President Biden. I just feel that it's time for him to step aside if we were to be able to protect what he allowed us to gain in 2020, which was a victory for democracy, but he delivered us from Trump then. He could be delivering us to Trump this year if we have more of what happened last Thursday. Well, I say that we needed a great night. We got a great disappointment instead. Whether there are some physical problems there, I don't know. I think rather than some tests here or there, what I'd like to see is the president out actively engaging with journalists like you, answering the tough questions, demonstrating that he doesn't need a teleprompter. But I think the setback that has occurred will be difficult to overcome under any circumstance. We're looking at not people like me who believe Joe Biden has accomplished a great deal for our country, but a very small portion of the country who are undecided, who may be what are called the double haters that don't like either candidate. And I think we would be better off if we had a new candidate who could present a new vision for our country. And we can do that if we have an open and fair democratic process over the next few weeks. Well, it was very tough. In retrospect, I wish I had said it earlier because I think this needed to be a decision that was made much earlier in the process. But the debate and the ruling by the Supreme Court and then the input from my neighbors here in Texas was so strong from my own family that I felt that I needed to speak out. And being an older member of Congress, not about to start a new career and worrying about that, or being a particularly vulnerable member of Congress, it seemed to me that I had the ability to do that perhaps some of my colleagues who have exactly the same views, that I might speak even if they couldn't come in a public way. I hope some of them will be calling the White House and voicing their private concerns if they can't join me publicly, and that people around the country will let their members of Congress and the Senate know, just as my constituents have, how they feel about this. Because there's just too much at risk here to go with less than a strong candidate. I'm not anyone, and I'm certainly not doing this on behalf of any candidate, only because of my love of this country and my great concern about what would happen under a Trump presidency and how very probable that could be at the moment when you look at the numbers. Vice President Harris certainly would be in the mix, but we have a number of people that you've had on this show before, governors from several states, a number of members of the Senate, perhaps some members of the cabinet and the vice president. Let's give them an opportunity just as soon as possible to present themselves to the country, to our convention delegates, and move forward in a process that is open to all of them, that's not some backroom deal to select a candidate, but helps us move forward with the kind of new alternative that so many people have been saying they want because they were unhappy with the two nominees that appeared to be coming. I remain hopeful. And yes, he did, as you note, in his campaign, he emphasized that he would be a transitional or bridge figure, and certainly he has had some transformational accomplishments. I believe that he, like Lyndon Johnson, in the heart of whose district I continue to serve, made decisions for the country and put that ahead of themselves. We know Donald Trump would never do that. He's solely about himself, but I remain hopeful that despite all the input from his own staff and perhaps from some family members, that he'll look at these numbers and realize that this is a hill just too high for him to climb and call on someone else. I think he would find a tremendous reaction from so many of us that care about what he's accomplished and know he shares our objective of trying to protect democracy and our values. And his stepping aside is probably the best way to accomplish that. Well, I've talked with Jim. As I did so many of our leadership and colleagues last Friday immediately after the debate, to voice my concern about the need for a change. I'm not surprised he'd support the vice president. She's very able. She should be in the mix. No, I don't think she has a total claim on the funds. It's a little more complex than I think the initial report that came out. I guess all the lawyers would be looking at it, but only if she's our nominee would I see her being able to take all the funds. And certainly I think there would be an uproar about that if there were a feeling that she was being given an unfair advantage, even as talented as she is.